Picture a hunting party on the East African savanna, roughly 12,000 years ago. 6 hunters moving single file through dry grass at dawn. 5 of them scan in a pattern: horizon, midground, the path ahead. Methodical, patient, conserving attention the same way they conserve water. The 6th one isn't doing any of that. His eyes are everywhere at once. He catches movement 300 meters to the left that the others haven't registered yet. He shifts direction before anyone else has processed the signal. He is already 10 steps off the path by the time the first hunter turns to look. The group follows. What he spotted was a herd breaking cover. They eat that night. For most of human history, he was not the problem. He was the reason they survived. Today, a child with those same traits sits in a classroom. He can't hold still. He interrupts. His attention slides off the page like water off glass. He gets a diagnosis, a label, a folder in the school counselor's office. The assumption built into every one of those systems is the same. Something went wrong. Something in him is broken and needs to be managed. That assumption holds up if you measure him against the last few hundred years of human civilization. Measure him against the 200,000 years that came before, and the picture looks completely different. In 2008, biological anthropologist Dan Eisenberg at Northwestern University published a study that changed how researchers think about this. He was working with the Ariaal people of northern Kenya, a traditionally nomadic herding population. Some Ariaal communities had recently settled into permanent villages, others had not. Eisenberg's team looked at a specific genetic variant linked to ADHD, a version of the dopamine receptor gene called DRD47R. This variant is associated with novelty-seeking, impulsivity, and the inability to sustain focus on low-stimulation tasks. A genetic signature that looks almost exactly like a clinical ADHD profile. If you're enjoying this so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. In nomadic Ariaal communities, men who carried DRD47R were better nourished than men who didn't. The trait that looks like a disorder was correlating with survival advantage in the environment those men actually lived in. In the settled communities, the pattern reversed. Carriers of the same variant were worse nourished than non-carriers. Same gene, same people, different environment, different outcome. Eisenberg was careful about what he claimed. The study didn't prove that ADHD was a survival adaptation. What it showed was that a gene cluster associated with the condition behaved like an asset in one context and a liability in another. The environment wasn't neutral. The environment was doing something. Around the same time, a second line of research was building in a different direction. In 2004, evolutionary psychologist Tom Hartman published his expanded analysis of what he called the hunter versus farmer hypothesis. Hartman wasn't the first to suggest the idea, but he was the first to map it against the fossil and behavioral record with enough precision to make researchers take it seriously. His central argument was this: the same cognitive traits that disrupt a structured agricultural or classroom setting are the traits that made early persistence hunters exceptional. The two systems, hunter brain and farmer brain, are not better and worse versions of the same thing. They are two different tools built for two different worlds. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. To understand why, you need to understand what DRD4-7R actually changes in the brain. The dopamine system is your brain's signal for what matters. Dopamine doesn't create pleasure in the way most people assume. It creates attention. It flags novelty. It fires when you find something unexpected and prompts you to investigate further. The 7R variant raises the threshold. The brain needs stronger, more varied stimulation to register something as worth attending to. In a classroom, where the stimulation is low and predictable and identical for 6 hours straight, this looks like a deficit. The brain is not getting what it needs to register engagement, so it starts scanning for something more interesting. From the outside, that looks like distraction. From the inside, it is a brain searching for the signal level it was built to operate at. On a savanna, the same threshold becomes a tool. Psychologist Jay Nigg at Oregon Health and Science University has written extensively about the hunter advantage framework. A brain that requires higher stimulation to register a signal also processes a larger volume of environmental information at once. Hyperscanning rather than hyperfocus. Distributed attention across a landscape rather than locked engagement on a single point. The hunter version of this brain wasn't ignoring the horizon while looking left. It was tracking both at once. There is a reason persistence hunting required exactly this. Persistence hunters didn't sprint. They tracked prey over hours and miles, reading terrain, reading animal behavior, reading a dozen signals at once across a landscape that changed every hour. The ability to hold multiple streams of information without narrowing down to one of them wasn't a nice feature. It was the core skill. And the tribes that kept hunters with this cognitive profile weren't being charitable. They were keeping a competitive advantage alive. There is evidence that these roles were assigned deliberately, not by accident. Anthropologist Richard Lee spent years living alongside the San people of the Kalahari during field research across the 1960s and 1970s. What he documented was a consistent division of cognitive labor within hunting groups. Certain individuals were positioned at the outer edges of a hunt, not because they were stronger or faster, but because they were better at processing competing signals simultaneously. They weren't tracking the prey, they were watching everything else: the terrain shifts, the secondary herd movements, the wind change that might scatter the animals before the main group closed in. The community wasn't tolerating a difference, it was deploying one. The people who struggled most to sit still in camp were often the same people sent furthest out on the hunt. What that means for you is this: the diagnosis you received, or the one someone you love received, was built entirely around a sedentary, high-structure environment that has existed for roughly 0.1% of human history. The brain it describes as disordered is the same brain that read a changing landscape faster than anyone else in the group. The same brain that spotted what the others missed. The same brain that moved before the others had finished deciding, and was right. You are not carrying a broken brain. You are carrying a brain built for a world that no longer exists, and the gap between that world and this one is producing friction that looks, from the outside, like disorder. The Ariaal study didn't argue that ADHD is always an advantage. Eisenberg never claimed that. The point was more uncomfortable than a simple reversal. The same traits that cost you your focus in a structured environment are the exact same traits that made your ancestors invaluable when the landscape demanded constant adaptation. The trait didn't change. The world did. The shift from hunting to farming spread across roughly 4,000 to 5,000 years as agriculture moved through Europe and Western Asia. That sounds like a long time until you hold it against the 200,000 years the hunter brain had been shaping itself. Evolution doesn't move on a schedule that recognizes cultural change. The traits built into the DRD4-7R variant received no signal that the world had reorganized itself around fields and grain stores and schoolrooms. Hundreds of generations would have needed to pass for selection pressure to meaningfully shift the gene frequencies in any population. In most parts of the world, that process never ran long enough to change much. The cognitive variation you see in attention and impulse and novelty seeking across modern populations is still running on a system that was calibrated for a world that agriculture replaced almost overnight in evolutionary terms. There is something worth sitting with in that, not as reassurance and not as an excuse, but as a shift in how you understand yourself. If you have ever felt like your brain was fighting the world around it, like you were running the wrong software on the wrong machine, that feeling has a real and ancient explanation. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are running the cognitive profile of someone built to handle things that were never predictable in an environment that demanded you stay ready for anything. The sixth hunter, the one who broke formation 300 meters before anyone else turned their head, wasn't tolerated by the group despite his differences. He was there because of them. The tribe didn't manage him. They needed him. Your brain did not arrive without reason. It arrived with a purpose, shaped by a world far older than the one you woke up in this morning. That isn't a consolation. That's just the truth. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.